Hi guys, and welcome to a brand new series on the F1 Debate Show. This is called Drivers Decoded, and this is a brand new series where me and Jordan are going to be talking about some of the drivers that we saw race on the Formula 1 grid not too long ago, but that are not really talked about that much in Formula 1. But obviously we saw most of their careers. So their highlights, we're going to be talking about how well they did in their Formula 1 careers, and just analysing basically everything about how they did in Formula 1 and their key aspects in the sport. And the first guy that we're going to be talking about is quite a special one to me anyways. He was part of my favourite team of Red Bull Racing. He joined the sport in 2002, retired in 2013, spent most of his time with, as I've just said, my team. Won our first race in Silverstone 2010, and that is the Aussie grid of Mark Webber. So a little bit of facts about Mark. He joined Formula 1 in 2002 with Minardi. Now, his first race was the 2002 Australian Grand Prix, where he finished 6th place, so pretty impressive from Mark getting into the points. He had a good season with Minardi in 2002, moved to Jaguar, who you might recognise the name of, in 2003 and 2004. Two good seasons there, and he partnered Christian Klein, who was the first driver to partner in Red Bull. Williams was 2005 and 2006, alongside 2016 world champion Nico Rosberg. But the main topic, as I've just said, is we are going to be talking about his Red Bull career. Now, Red Bull formed in 2005 after changing from Jaguar, based out of Salzburg, and you might know them as the four-time drivers and constructors world champions on present day. They are on the grid at the moment, but we are going to be talking about Mark Webber's career at the team. He joined in 2007. He was partnered alongside Scottish driver David Coulthard, who is a pundit in Channel 4's rendition of Formula 1. And that's where this episode is going to start. So on the other end, we have Jordan, which is the other presenter of the F1 Debate Show. And we are going to be talking about Mark Webber's career. So the first thing that we are going to mention is, of course, his crash in Fuji 2007. And that was with Sebastian Vettel. Not much was known about Sebastian, the young German driver, until he collided into the back of Mark Webber. Both of them had to retire, with Mark Webber having some pretty strong words to say about the young German driver. So Jordan, bringing you into this, not known to Mark that he would run into Seb again and he would be a big part of his career in the future. How do you think that Fuji 2007 changed Mark's kind of mentality about Sebastian? And how do you think their relationship got started back in that rainy race in Japan?
No, a lot of Formula 1 fans know the relationship between Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber, and I think this is where it almost starts, if you like. Not where it originated from. I don't think that people wouldn't say, oh, it was from Fuji 2007. I think they would probably say, at a later date, which is something that we'll get onto in a little bit. But yeah, it was like the first kind of like, okay, my name's Mark Webber and my name is Sebastian Vettel. And by the way, Lal, he wasn't driving for BMW Sauber then. He was actually driving for Toro Rosso. He actually signed with the team for the rest of the season, and then signed full time in 2008. So like again, they were almost part of the same team, Toro Rosso and Red Bull being together. And I think Mark would have been like, I think he probably would have like gave him a bit of leeway, because I think that he couldn't see Seb, or because it was quite chucking it down that day, wasn't it? It was torrential rain, and I think Mark Webber had food poisoning that day, where he was actually being sick in the car, which was like disgusting. I've never actually seen that before ever, and this is before these were before our days, but like I think certainly the relationship got off to a bit of a bad start, if you like, I think Sebastian was like, right, okay, this is Mark Webber and this is what I'm going to do. Obviously, lo and behold, as to what was going to happen in the future. But yeah, I think this. I wouldn't say knocked Mark Webber's confidence. I just think, I think it was just like a little like scratch, if you like, in their relationship. But I think a lot of people didn't know what was to come in the future.
No, not at all. 2007 with Red Bull alongside David Coulthard wasn't the best season to get started with. Before that, it was Austrian driver Christian Klein at the helm with the Red Bull team. They wanted much better things. They were midway in the World Championship, so not a great start for them. I'd say things really took off for them in 2009 when that guy that we just talked about, Sebastian Vettel, came into the team. A few races in China 2009 was where Red Bull took their first victory in Formula 1, and that was with Sebastian Vettel. Now, under the management of British Team principal Christian Horner, Red Bull Racing finally got their first win at Shanghai. Sebastian Vettel taking the checkered flag with Mark Webber second. Now this was a rainy race, just past over a decade since their first win. Now Red Bull were finally on the top step of the podium, so they changed from Jaguar back in 2005. So they've had quite a sticky run in Formula One since then. So it took them 4 years to get their first win. But then finally Red Bull were at the top step. Was this signs of things to come, with this great partnership? Sebastian, obviously, he'd won his first race a year before with Toro Rosso in Italy 2008, which also was a rainy race. Mark Webber, he'd had a few podiums here and there. He had 42 overall in his career. He'd had a few of those beforehand, obviously with his respective teams, a few with Red Bull, but never a race win. They'd finally got on top, and they were finally heading towards bigger and better things. So was this signs for Red Bull to come when teams like Ferrari and McLaren were looking up the grid and thinking, okay, here's a new team that we need to really be watching out for, and two new drives that we need to be watching out for as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think the regulation change in 2009 was certainly a breath of fresh air, not just for Red Bull, but for Formula One in general. Like in the past, we'd seen the likes of McLaren and Ferrari at the top, and then all of a sudden they were kind of battling themselves lower down the grid, and Red Bull and Brawn at the time were at the top. Vettel getting that first race win and for Red Bull, it almost stamped their authority in Formula One, because at the time Brawn had the best car. With the double diffuser and all that, they got off to a brilliant start, and Red Bull were like, well, not just them, but everyone else was like, oh god, like how do we stop these? And then Mark Webber getting that win, huge weight off his shoulders, definitely, because of he's been in Formula One for like since 2002, and having that win would certainly have. But I mean, you heard his reaction when he crossed that line.
There's Germany, yes.
Yeah, in Germany. So I mean, that just tells you everything. A big weight off his shoulders in that sense. And then he would have known that, right, I'm at a team that for me, Mark was at the right place at the right time with Red Bull, being there since 2007. He could have been there a lot longer if he stuck with Jaguar after 2004, because, as like you said, Lyle, they changed it to Red Bull in 2005, which is something I always thought he did. I always seem to forget about his Williams days when he had that 2-year stint there.
And he partnered Nico Rosberg, which is a name that is quite new to Williams, and is going to be quite well known in Formula One now. Just as you were saying there, Jordan, that was Germany. I originally said China, which was Red Bull's first win, Sebastian Vettel's first win with Mark Webber second. Just going a few races into Nürburgring as where Mark took his first win, where Jordan was just saying. Something that I did find was quite strange, though, that Mark Webber had been in Formula One for a long time, and this was his fourth team in Formula One. Sebastian had been in Formula One for just going on 2 years. Obviously with different teams. Obviously started with BMW, went to Toro Rosso, won his first race in Monza, and then obviously now had won in China. I just thought it was strange the way that he'd worked his way up to getting 2 wins and Mark had none. It was actually quite clear as well at that point that the team were then basing themselves around Sebastian Vettel. A new team, Adrian Newey, who you might recognise the name of also. He was the chief designer of the car. Really good friends with Sebastian Vettel. Also, Rocky, who was, I believe, from Germany or Austria, something like that. He was his race engineer. So with those names in the team, and obviously, as I've just said there, the team principal of Christian Horner really taken to this guy, it was looking like they were building the team around Sebastian and not really building the team around Mark. I mean, this is new territory, John. They've just won a few races.
Yeah.
Obviously, even after Germany, when Mark had won his first race, or you could say even beforehand when he was going towards it, they were kind of leaving Mark, even though Mark was still on contention, he was still on the same level, they were kind of leaving him to dust, really, even at this early stage, that the Red Bull weren't really thinking about Mark's potential. Would you say that they put Sebastian, even at this early stage in 2009, that they put all their eggs in Sebastian's basket and left Mark kind of out to dry?
Probably in a way. I think the talent that Seb had, he was part of the Red Bull program from a young age, and it was probably inevitable that he was going to get into Formula One, probably with Red Bull. But at the time, Red Bull weren't the top team, before 2009 when when Sebastian Vettel was part of Red Bull when he was going in with Toro Rosso. So really, I think people saw Sebastian Vettel as like a future world champion. I just think he was in the right place at the right time going into Red Bull in 2009. Red Bull would have known how good their car would have been. They would have been like, right, they would have had a few years ahead of everybody else in terms of prepping their car, similar to what Mercedes did in terms of the engine back in 2014. Similar kind of way, like, with Hamilton being there at the right time. Certainly, they would have seen, right, okay, we've got a really good young driver in the ranks, we've got a really good car, and we've got experience with Mark Webber. They probably wanted Mark to work alongside Sebastian Vettel and kind of, lead Sebastian on, if you know what I mean, like in sense of, right, okay, this guy is going to be the face of our team. We want him to be world champion. We can be world champion ourselves. But I think Mark Webber, you're not in Formula 1 just to be a pushover, to be a number 2 driver. You're there to win races, but not more than that. You're there to become a world champion. And Mark Webber knew he was in a team that could do that, and he certainly didn't want to be a pushover. But I think Red Bull had more or less all their eggs in Vettel's basket. Certainly.
Yeah, exactly. So Red Bull at this point were kind of compared to Hesketh, which were a team back in the 70s. The way that they would kind of transform the paddock into this kind of glitz and glamour kind of place. Red Bull, again, even if you weren't a Formula 1 fan, you'll know that their name comes from an energy drink company. That energy drink company is based out of the US with ties in Austria, and obviously that's where the Formula 1 team came from. The base in Austria is also used for motorbike, speedboard, and the air race, and just basically many kind of dangerous sports around the world.
It's like, are they an energy drinks brand, or are they a sports company? Like, what is it?
Really changed. I think it really changed with Formula 1, but that's the thing, and that's what I was just saying about with Hesketh, because literally since day dot they came into the paddock and they were playing loud music. They had all these celebrities there, and it changed Formula 1 kind of from this sport where it was all serious to a bit more lightheartedness, because I know teams that obviously, of course, been inviting celebrities and things like that before, playing loud music, but Red Bull really changed the dynamics when they changed. Well, if you've seen the movie Rush, for example, they said on that Hesketh served oysters on the first event. Red Bull in the first event had a groove playlist, with big bass speakers, headphones, and I say all this glitz and glamour, kind of Monaco on the go, but all race that they do in the calendar.
If you remember in Monaco, sorry, just quickly there, Lal. In Monaco in 2005, they had the Superman livery, didn't they? They had it was something that we'd never seen before, and everyone was dressed up as Superman with capes. And then in 2006, you had the Star Wars theme. I think it was 2006.
Yeah.
Was it? Oh, have I got that the wrong way around? What was it? Was it Star Wars first, or was it Superman?
Star Wars, yeah.
Was it Star Wars first, then Superman? All right. Because I remember Superman was the year that they got their first podium with David Coulthard, and then Christian Horner had to jump in the pool naked, wearing the cape.
That was it.
That was right. So sorry, it was Star Wars first, and then it was Superman. That was totally different. You could never imagine Ferrari or McLaren doing that. It was like, I like these guys. Like, Red Bull almost became everyone's second favorite team at the time. It was like, wow, I like these guys. These are fun.
They had a swimming pool. They had a dive. They had everything in
the
Monaco.
Energy station as well. That was something new as well.
Yeah.
Very modern at the time, wasn't it? The energy station that they had.
Definitely. So it was a really expanding team and really excited to watch. A lot of people had them, as John said, as their secondary team. But then it all changed quite dramatically. Turkey 2010, which was a race, obviously in the primary stages of the 2010 season, a season that really was the crunch time for that team. And when I say crunch, I mean they'd only been in Formula for 5 years, but of course they were a fast-growing team. They developed the new car, and they were going for big things. And as we just said there, Mark Webber was no pushover, but Sebastian was, of course, hungry. Red Bull junior driver, obviously come through the ranks with Toro Rosso, and he was going for race victories, especially battling the ever-growing Fernando Alonso, who just moved to Ferrari at that point, and obviously the two strong McLaren drivers in Button and Hamilton. Turkey 2010, John, we all remember that, the controversial crash between the two Red Bull drivers. Firstly, who do you think was at fault? And of course, expanding on that, what was the implications, kind of short term, and building into something for a crash between two drivers when we have seen teammates collide in the past? has normally led to big things. So if you were Christian Horner, if you were someone in Red Bull, how would you think? Would anything be going on in your head? What alarm bells would be going off thinking, my main drivers, the two drivers who are contesting a world championship, and hopefully you'll get Red Bull constructors, have just collided with each other in a very a race that we need to win?
I don't know who was to blame for that crash. I remember Helmut Marko saying in the next Grand Prix, I might have been Canada that year, I think. I could be wrong, I'm not too sure. But I remember him saying in the next Grand Prix after that he put the blame at Mark's door, if I remember that correctly. But in my opinion, I've seen it numerous times. It's a tricky one because it looks like they both move into each other. So I would just say it was 50-50. I would say, Mark hit Seb and Seb hit Mark, and I don't really know. I want to know, people who are listening to this, I want to know their opinions on this, definitely. It would have been something good to talk about back in the day if we were doing the F1 debate show back in 2010, how good that would be.
I wish we were.
Oh, yeah. But, Red Bull had just missed out on the Constructors and the Drivers' World Championship in 2009. In the second half of the season, they had the best car. They got the double diffuser that Braun had, and Braun kind of lost pace with themselves, and Red Bull were almost playing catch-up. McLaren found a bit of form, so that kind of hindered them a bit. So 2010 was like, right, let's do this again. They had problems in Bahrain. I remember they had a really quick car that year. Pole position for Seb. He was going to win the Grand Prix, and then he had a exhaust problem. I think I remember that, and then Ferrari had that one too. And it took time for Sebastian to kind of find his feet, and then he got into a bit of a rhythm. Mark had just won the previous Grand Prix in Spain and in Monaco at the time, if I remember correctly. So I think Turkey was the next one after that. And so Mark was on a good run of form. So were Red Bull. So everything was looking hunky dory. And then those two just hit each other, and it's wow, this is what do you do? I think Red Bull had never been in that situation of right, okay, we've got to deal with these two drivers who now are locked heads with each other because now they're both going for the world championship. They both want to be world champion, and Red Bull are now like, what do we do? Do we give team orders out? Who do we give number one role to? Because if we give number one role to Vettel or to Webber, it's going to upset the other driver, and we don't want that because they, Red Bull have all their trust in Sebastian. They kind of wanted Mark to play number two driver, and Mark was like, I'm not having that in a way, and he wanted to win the championship. So yeah, I think that was where the kind of the boiling point of their relationship started. Right, I remember saying that when those two hit each other in Fuji, that wasn't it. It was a little bit, but that wasn't the official start of it. I would say this was it. I think they were still talking, briefly then, but it was only going to get worse. I think Red Bull knew the problem that they were going to have if they didn't keep these two drivers level-headed, and it was only going to be a problem that was only going to get worse throughout the course of throughout their careers.
Yeah, definitely. Turkey was a bit of a strange move. Just when Jordan was saying there about team orders, obviously later on in that year, in Germany 2010, was Fernando Alonso and Felipe Massa's Fernando Was Faster Than You, where the team was fined in Italy. In terms of team orders, they were trying to keep it. They were trying to keep it separate, and Christian Horner said that there'd be no team orders given. They both know how to race. I think that was the start of it. It wasn't anything massive to kick up a fuss about, but if they were going to go for the constructors, which is what Red Bull wanted to, especially after just losing it marginally to Braun in 2009, then that would definitely not help. So a few races after that was Valencia, the European Grand Prix in 2010. Now you might not remember that race, but I bet you remember the big moment where Mark Webber's Red Bull went smashing into the back of Heikki Kovalainen's Lotus Caterham, or whatever you want to call it at that point. At the time, yeah. And went spiraling into the air. Now we've seen some spectacular crashes in Formula One before, but that was incredible to see. We can also say that, of course, both drivers were perfectly fine. They both got out of the car straight away. You knew that Mark Webber was fine because he took the steering wheel straight out of the car. But when he came out, his feet, because he was a big guy, basically the the board of where the front wing actually stops and the pedals are, where your feet are, is what Mark Webber had left on the car when he went smashing into the barrier. It was a scary crash though, Jordan, wasn't it, to see that he went in the air. He went almost 360 into the air. Really crazy,
Yeah.
but as I say, he was absolutely okay. Do you think that would have affected anyone in the Formula 1 community? We hate seeing a crash, even though they're both okay, and we can talk about it afterwards. But how would that? Do you think that would have affected Mark Webber's psyche at all, and Hakey's and Red Bulls going forward?
I wouldn't have thought so. No, because I remember the crash. Yeah, that was massive, and it just proved how safe Formula One is at the time. I mean, it's it is still safe now. I know, we all question it, but it is to a level safe. And like, I think I remember his interview after that in Silverstone in practice, or even before the weekend started. He was saying that he was talking to I think it might have been Jackie Stewart. He had a conversation with, and he was saying that, like, back in my day, you wouldn't have walked away from that car at all. You would have died. And then he would have been reflecting, like, okay, this is how safe Formula One is. And I think he would have known that, all right, I was going to be fine, because the structure of the car was so good. And I remember, like, he also said that I remember he said that it was a big crash, like, as if, like, oh, if you want to call it a crash. And, like, you would tell he wasn't bothered at all by it. He was probably a bit, like, surprised because, like, Kovalainen, started braking a lot earlier, and it caught Webber out and, flipped the car up and everything. So I think it would have been, like, the opposite effect of negative. It would have been, like, a positive, like, okay, right, the cars are safe. That was a big crash. Mark's okay. Mark's not bothered by it whatsoever. He's not injured or anything like that. He's
If anything,
totally...
he was frustrated.
Oh yeah, he would have been like, oh, I could have won this Grand Prix. I could have been on the podium, and at the time he was fighting for the World Championship. So, like, yeah, he would have been more frustrated than shocked or upset or whatever, or injured in that matter. And I think, yeah, like, a lot of people would have, like, looked at that and went, like, these cars are safe, and probably would have raced a lot harder. And Mark wouldn't have thought twice about it, been like, yeah, all right, I flipped over, but I'm alive, I'm fine, I'm well. So yeah, it wouldn't have bothered him in the slightest, no way.
Yeah, one of the things that reminded me a little bit of Fernando Alonso in 2012 when he crashed with Roman Grosjean and Lewis Hamilton in Spa. Fernando Alonso was going for the World Championship then in that year, and obviously he was very prevalent towards the end. And again, he wasn't really that bothered about the crash. He was just more bothered about not scoring any points and not helping Ferrari and, of course, himself in that year. So yeah. But you knew Mark was okay and annoyed, as I said, because you saw him throw the steering wheel out of the car after the car came out of the air. So the next race, Jordan, and you just mentioned it quickly with his interview with Sir Jackie Stewart, was of course a very special one. And what was that special moment?
Oh, let's have a think about this. It wasn't our first Grand Prix, was it? The British Grand Prix.
It might have been, yes.
Ooh,
a very special, very, very, very special moment that me and Jordan went on. Kind of the start of the F1 debate show, if you like. We're not going to get into all of that teary remarks. But yeah, Silverstone 2010. A race that I was very excited to go to. Jordan was very excited to go to. I didn't actually know much about Formula 1. But my love of Red Bull kind of started at this race. The reason why I got started at Red Bull firstly is because I was friends with Jordan. We also had this other friend who was a Ferrari fan, so he went to Ferrari and bought either Alonso or Massa. I think it was Massa stuff.
Massa, yeah.
Jordan was a McLaren fan and went to buy Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button stuff.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I've got to find a team now, and then that's why I found Red Bull. I think they were, I don't know where they were in the championship there, but they were very high up. They were both in World Championship contention, and so were the team as well. And I found this team, it looked quite, nice, and I heard of Red Bull before, so I clinged to them, bought a Mark Webber cap, Sebastian Vettel t-shirt. I was with those two drivers as a whole in the team. And then obviously, Mark Webber went to dominate the weekend and won the race. And I even remember, Jordan, where I was standing for the Sunday, just at the end when we were heading back, I was standing at the same place as where Mark Webber was doing his celebratory donuts, which you're not allowed to do now because you actually get a fine by the FIA, all about wasting, burning up your engine and things like that. But I don't know where F1 came from, but yes, where he did his donuts is where I stood. And me and John, when we went to Silverstone, we talked a lot about where that was because I have no idea. We were trying to piece that together. But yes, it was special for us. So Jordan, of course, how did you find the first event and Mark Webber's win? Because we got to see that firsthand. How did that change the kind of the whole outcome of the Grand Prix for you? A new driver, a Red Bull driver, my team winning as our first Grand Prix from school.
Oh, it was a brilliant experience, wasn't it? Like we've mentioned it a few times on the channel, but like I'll never get bored of talking about it. Like our first Grand Prix, at the time we were like casual Formula One fans. Like with me, I used to watch it on the telly. I wouldn't take that much interest. I knew a few drivers. I didn't know many teams. I didn't know many drivers. I don't think I knew Mark Webber. Anyway, so and I remember like the friend that you were talking about before, like kind of told me the teams, told me the drivers, and I kind of understood. Well, a little bit as to what was going on. It was pretty much the game when I bought it. I didn't buy it. I got it for Christmas later that year, and that kind of my knowledge for Formula One kind of exploded after that. My love for it kind of started here. This is like Genesis for me for Formula One. 2010 British Grand Prix was certainly Genesis in terms of my love for it, and like I don't really remember. I remember the start of the race. I remember the end of the race because I was upset. And again, I didn't know. This is probably how I heard about Webber, but I can't remember thinking about Webber or thinking, oh look, this guy Mark Webber, he won the Grand Prix. I must have known he won it because this is how I must have heard of him in the first place. But other than that, I didn't really recognise his name. I was, looking out for Hamilton and Button and Schumacher. I knew Schumacher, of course, so I was looking out for those guys. And Alonso, I think I knew. Massa because our friend was a Massa fan, and everybody else I didn't really know. So yeah, like Webber was so obscure. So like because he won the Grand Prix, I might have known that I might have known him. But I know that I keep forgetting this as well. But also Nico Rosberg was on the podium that day as well. He finished in third place. So like. Yeah, there's a little bit of history for you. I think one of his first podiums, or might have been his first podium. I could be wrong with that one, but I'm sure his first podium might have been at the British Grand Prix. It might have been earlier than that, but yeah,
wow.
He was on the podium that day as well. Yeah,
very special. That we might have been there for that. Watch out for that name and the team as well for future.
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, Britain was a good race to watch. Now we said that he was in contention for the World Championship. Now Mark Webber had gone a long time without winning, even just a race, and he hadn't won a World Championship since. He hadn't won a World Championship in his career. Now, we've known from Formula One from such an early age that you've kind of got to do it as soon as you enter Formula One. The days of taking quite a few years to get to that World Championship status has kind of left Formula One, and he's been in since 2002, which makes it 7 years, his 8th season in Formula One. He needs to have put his name on there very fast. But you had the two McLarens of Jenson and Lewis, you had the two Ferraris of Fernando and Felipe, and Sebastian all going for that championship. So all the races were tight, and of course things like Turkey won't have helped that. South Korea Grand Prix, Mark Webber came in the rainy race where there was 7 retirements, I believe, in that race, including him, who he collided with in the wet conditions. No points for them, obviously a double DNF for Red Bull, as Sebastian Vettel had an engine blowout in that race. That wouldn't have helped his career, and that's where everyone said that he lost his World Championship, and probably the only World Championship that he could have effectively won, Jordan, in his career.
It was a big blow for him, wasn't it, as well? And just on a random note as well, I was thinking about it there. Before, when I was talking about Turkey 2010, and I said it was after Spain and Monaco, it wasn't. It was before. It was actually round 4 of the championship. So that was before he even won those 2 Grand Prix. I just thought that in my head, because obviously the calendar was different back then. But yeah, anyways, back to Korea. Yeah, like Korea was, at the time, what I think Webber had a decent lead in the World Championship. I'm sure he was leading... I'm certain he was in the lead of the championship at that point. They had a 1-2 at the start in qualifying. I'm not sure who. I think Seb got pole. I think it was Seb pole and Mark second. So Mark was in the lead of the Grand Prix, and then lost control in the slippery conditions, and then hit the wall, reversed back into Rosberg, I think it was, and then game over. And then Sebastian also retired later on that weekend. So, and I think Red Bull were like dominating at this stage. So it was like someone else is going to win. But the only thing I remember from this Grand Prix, a lot of Formula One fans would have been like, "Oh, Webber's out the championship. Oh no, oh this is bad. This is bad." For me, I was in tears because Fernando Alonso overtook Lewis Hamilton for the race lead. I was fuming at that. So like, I was, oh, you, yeah, whatever. But like, no, this was a big blow for Mark Webber, and I think he would have known that he's got a lot to do throughout the next Grand Prix. Again, I can't remember what race was after that. Again, the calendar just completely gone from my mind. So he would have known that there was, I think it was only 3, 4 races left. I think after that, 4 races left. I think after Korea. So like there was a lot to do in the terms of World Championship as well. It made his life a lot harder. So he would have been annoyed at that. But Mark, being the calm head he was, he would have been like, right, okay, let's forget that and let's move on to the next one.
Yep. He did claw back to championship contention. It actually ended up in that year where there was 6 drivers going for the World Championship. For the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which was the final race of that year. So the permutations for Mark Webber was to win the race. Fernando Alonso was his nearest championship rival to finish 3rd or lower, and Sebastian Vettel to finish 4th or lower. Of course, that didn't happen, and Sebastian won the race with Red Bull constructor, finally winning a Constructors' World Championship. Now, of course, Mark Webber would have had a massive feat in that race. I remember watching that race, watching Fernando, and he was always asking Andrea Stella where he was in the race, and so was Mark with Adrian Newey. But Mark Webber, he was part of Red Bull winning the Constructors, but he was part of that amazing 2010 win. But it wasn't him on the top step, Jordan, or the champion even. And obviously his teammate Sebastian Vettel, who I believe was the youngest world champion at that point to win the World Championship. Kind of how upsetting is that you are part of that team, but you're not the one who's won the World Championship?
He would have been upset. I'll mute when my dog was barking.
Okay.
Make sure she stopped. Right, we're done. Yeah, I think he would have certainly looked back at Korea and thought, what if? I think he would have been that. But again, he would have been very disappointed with himself that he didn't win the championship. Like his teammate won. He would have been happy for him and the team, of course, for winning the constructors in Brazil. I think he did. I think Vettel won that race, and then Red Bull clinched the constructors. Yeah. Going into Abu Dhabi, knowing he could potentially be world champion, and of course it didn't work out for him. He would have been gutted. Of course he would have been, because like you were very, very close to win the world championship and he didn't. So like he would have been sad about that. But he would have been like, right, okay, what's done is done. I'd imagine he would have been like this. Knowing Webber, he would have been like, right, what's done is done. Let's move on for next season, because I'm pretty sure that the car would be just as good next year as what it's been this year. Because in a way, I think it would have been like as well thinking about Seb, because Seb didn't lead the World Championship at all throughout the course of the season up until the very last Grand Prix of that season. So he would have been leading it for so long, and then I've lost it in the last day. But never mind. What's done is done. Let's move on to next season.
Yeah, exactly. Mark was heading into 2011 with the RB7, which was Red Bull's car for the 2011 season. It was unbelievably dominant. It won the Constructors, with Sebastian Vettel taking 11 wins in that year. Mark Webber was behind, I think, 6 wins for him. So pretty strong from the Australian. But as I say, it was more Sebastian. Pretty bog standard season until then, but we come to the midway part of the season, a year on from what we've just been talking about, which was Silverstone, the 2011 edition, the brand new circuit in Silverstone. Fernando Alonso took the lead with Sebastian in second. Sebastian was running in second place for most of that race, but it was slipping back, obviously, when Red Bull needed the win to fight Ferrari in the Constructors. Sebastian had cold tyres and was battling to stay into second place. When the team intervened and said to Mark Webber he wanted to maintain a gap behind Sebastian Vettel, which of course Mark did not play ball. Mark was getting close to Sebastian, trying to take second place off him. The team got involved, calling it Multi-12. And this was what started out as kind of a Turkey-esque kind of problem, and as I say, would go on to spark many problems with Red Bull. So Jordan, obviously you were saying before about the crash in Turkey 2010, that was the first problem that Red Bull kind of had to deal with between their two drivers, and now we've come to, a year after that, and now the Red Bulls are battling again, and then yet again the team have got to intervene. So how do you think they looked at that? And then now it's 100% Mark Webber's fault that he isn't maintaining the gap. Why did Mark do that? And again, how did that affect his relationship with the team after that?
I think certainly after 2010, I think probably Red Bull had a lot more, bought some more eggs and put even more eggs in Vettel's basket for Red Bull anyway, because I think Webber would have been frustrated that the fact that, you know, Vettel is getting, like, I know, like, surely he would have known he was the number one driver, so obviously he was going to get priority, if you like, but I think Webber would have been so frustrated and in a way just like, right, I'm going to ignore team orders because, like, you know, he's done it before, like, who does he, like, all right, he's won a world championship, but, like, so what, like, so do I want to win a championship still, like, it's unlikely that I'm going to do it this year, but it's not over till it's over. So why not give it a go? And it would have been out of pure frustration as well. Red Bull would have been like again, like, oh, like, Mark, just leave Seb alone. Just, like, what's the point in battling him, because, like, he's going to be world champion. Like, he wasn't officially world champion at the point. Like, I think Red Bull might have been worried that, like, the McLarens or the Ferraris might have just all of a sudden found some decent pace and then overtook them, because 2011 was more Red Bull, wasn't it? It was McLaren was here and there. Ferrari was awful that year. They had one win, which was the Grand Prix we're talking about now in 2011. Alonso won that one. So, like, and I think Webber was in a car that could have won the Grand Prix. Definitely, he was in a really good car. And did he win any Grand Prix before then in 2011? Can't remember. I
think he might have. I think he had 4 wins that season.
Wins that,
but still strong by Mark Webber. But showing that he wants to battle his teammate. So yes, Red Bull, pretty strong season from them. Sebastian got the World Championship in 2011. In Japan. 2011 in Japan.
Yeah.
The following race in Korea was where Red Bull lifted the constructors, and then the penultimate race, I believe it was in that year, was Brazil 2011. Sebastian Vettel was stuck in 6th gear and he was leading the race, to which, after all the problems had gone on with Silverstone and things like that, and a problem in Belgium that year that had escalated, Sebastian said to the team that going into the Senna S's, he would let Mark go, which this means that effectively Sebastian would let Mark go into first place, because of, obviously, Sebastian had a problem getting out of 6th gear. So this was quite a bold move by Sebastian, a man who was known to be quite selfish, Jordan, on track. You know, he wouldn't give anyone space. He wouldn't let anyone, you know, do what he wanted to do. But yeah, in this race, we were seeing him move over for his teammates. We included this, I think, because this was quite a humble moment for, as I say, both Sebastian and for what he did for the team. Less so Mark. How do you think Sebastian and Mark's relationship, do you think they changed because of this? Do you think the dynamic changed in the team? What do you think happened after Brazil 2011?
No, I don't think anything changed, in my opinion. I think Vettel had won the championship, Red Bull had won the constructors. There was nothing to play for at the end of the day. It was just like a consolation win, if you like, or consolation points, or whatever you want to call it. Because Webber knew he was out of the fight from a long time ago. Vettel had problems. It was the right thing to do. To be fair, it was probably the only thing to do. But I do think about this moment a lot, and I do believe that if Vettel hadn't have become world champion before then, he was still in for the fight with his teammate Mark Webber. I think Seb would have done everything in his power to not allow Mark through, even though it might have been out of his hands, I suppose. But I think Vettel probably wouldn't have came on the radio and said, "Oh, I'll let Mark by," because he knew that, well, there's no point. It's not going to bother me in the slightest if he wins the Grand Prix or not, or, you know, finishes ahead of us. So, like, if this had been for a championship position, I think Vettel wouldn't have came on the radio. I think Red Bull would have had to intervene with Seb and go, right, I'll let Mark by, and he would have been like, no, I don't want to, because I'm going for the championship. And then this could have been a big moment, if you like, a big race in their championship, in their rivalry, because we've got a handful of them already and a handful more to come. This could have been one of them, but it wasn't. And for me, this didn't change anything, in my opinion. No way.
Heading into one of our favourite seasons, Jordan, 2012, 7 different winners in 7 different races, and one of those was Mark Webber. He won the 2012 Monaco Grand Prix, his last win in Formula 1. I just want to say one quick thing before we move on to this race, and you know what I'm going to mention here, about Michael Schumacher, who had got pole position in that race, but was was demoted 5 places due to his crash with Bruno Senna in Spain, the earlier race. Upsetting for him because Mark obviously qualified second. He would have started behind Michael. But nevertheless, Mark was promoted to first place, and with a track like Monaco where it is hard to overtake, Mark Webber did win the race, and that stood as his final win in Formula 1, Jordan.
Yeah.
Obviously, he wouldn't have known that at that point. He hadn't announced retirement, but how important was that to win? He'd won in Monaco, which he'd done before. He added his name to the 7 different winners, which I believe he was the 7th and the final. So how important was that to win in Monaco? I remember seeing that race and seeing the emotion in his eyes when he stood on the Prince Albert podium with Red Bull, knowing that things had changed and Sebastian wasn't the leader of the team anymore, and Mark still was in a fight.
I think Mark was the 6th winner in that run, because I think the next round was in Canada where Hamilton won, and he was the 7th. And then in the following round in Europe, it was Alonso, and he won that Grand Prix in that amazing 14th to first race, if you like. And again, Schumacher was on the podium for that race. Obviously, I know you mentioned Schumacher then. I remember Webber saying in 2012 that this car was the worst car that they've had probably since the new regulations came into play. And I agree. I thought that this would be the year that McLaren actually won the constructors, and Hamilton or Button would have a chance in the title fight, because the car was just, it wasn't really that good. Button won the first Grand Prix of the season, and then I think who won in Malaysia? Oh, it was Fernando Alonso, wasn't it?
It was after his amazing battle with Checo Perez.
Then Vettel didn't win his first race till Bahrain, which was round 4 then, because I remember who won in China. Oh, Rosberg won in China, yes. So and then Vettel didn't win till round 4, so it was like, oh wow, this is unusual.
Including a very strange win by one Pastor Maldonado,
yes,
which is somebody that I think a lot of people forget. And I can tell you now, we're not going to do him in this series, but boy, he would be a good one to do, wouldn't he, John? Because I mean, the episode will be very short because that's all he's done in his career, one in Spain. Yeah. But yes, well, wow, you forget.
And many other things that the F1 community loves to do to Pastor Maldonado, memes as well.
Yes.
Yes, I think Monaco was a kind of like a wake up call as well for Mark Webber as well, because he would have been like, all right, we have got a good car in a way. Let's see what we can do for the rest of the season. But I think realistically, he would have known that I don't have a solid chance, because he didn't really trust the car. In fact, I think 2012 was his worst finishing position in the standings for Red Bull since 2009. He finished in 6th that year, and that was his worst since Red Bull was like a competitive team, if you like. And then I think in 2009 he was 4th, and the rest of them he was 3rd. So 2006 wasn't a good year for Webber at all, and to take his last win in Monaco 2012, it was a good way to bow out, wasn't it? Well, for race wins, but I think the one victory he would have loved to get, which he didn't, was the Australian Grand Prix. That would have been incredible, wouldn't it?
If
he did get that, but he didn't. So sad.
The Australian Grand Prix is something that was eluded from him. He didn't know about his retirement, obviously, of course, at that point. That was his last win. He started the 2013 season with, again, a dominant Sebastian Vettel after he'd won his 3rd consecutive World Championship. He'd battled Fernando Alonso to the end of the 2012 season. The big moment in 2013 came in Malaysia, which is being dubbed the Multi-21 incident, or Multi-Lap 2-1. It happened when Sebastian Vettel was leading his teammate Mark Webber. Mark Webber was in front of Sebastian Vettel, of which Sebastian was given orders to stay behind Mark Webber for basically whoever is in front stays in front. Kind of a fair moment from the team.
Yeah.
Of course, Sebastian Vettel, being the 3-time world champion that he is, did not listen to that. Tried to overtake Mark into the various corners into the first sector. Complained on the radio that he didn't see Mark and things like that. Mark Webber said this is childish, and it all boiled down to a Sebastian win, a Mark Webber second, and probably one of the most icy Formula 1 podiums ever. And the most icy podium, John, that didn't feature the Iceman. So Multi-21 is what people say kind of the pot boiled over in the Red Bull kitchen. How
Absolutely.
do you feel? How do you see multi 21 went? Because there was a lot of motion in that, and for me, being a Red Bull fan, there was a lot of. It was quite a heated thing. Do you think this is what really, it boiled over? Turkey 2010 was nothing compared to this.
Oh yeah, this is peak at the rivalry between these two. I remember this Grand Prix so well. Like I remember watching it early doors here in the UK. It was just I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, I've never seen anything like this before in Formula One. Because if you haven't gathered already, we'd been fans since 2010, so this is like our 4th year, if you like, in Formula One. We've never seen anything like this, where like a guy was ignoring team orders, if you like. Like we seen Fernando was faster than you when Felipe allowed Alonso through. This was just it was none of it. It was just crazy. It was absolute craziness. And like Seb was told, as I said, to obey, stay behind Mark. He didn't. I mean, it was just madness. It was absolutely madness, and I think this certainly influenced Webber's decision to leave at the end of the season, because he's like, I simply can't work with this guy. It almost went like what Prost in Senna was like, because Prost was sacked by Ferrari in '92, in '91, had a year out in '92, and then was signed with Williams for '93. And then he said in his contract, when he signed that contract for '93, at no point do I want to work with Ayrton Senna. Then Senna announced he was be signing with Williams, and then Prost went, "I'm going. That's me done. I can't work with Senna anymore." This is what it was like. Yeah. Webber went, "Well, I'm getting on a bit. Formula One for me is done. I'm never going to win a world championship again. I'm out. I can't be." This certainly helped. Yeah. This certainly finalised this choice, because I think it was Silverstone the same year he announced he was leaving Formula One. So this is a big moment in Formula One. This is probably one of the most famous moments. Well, maybe in the V8 era, but certainly in modern day Formula One in the decade when you look back, because we've only got 7 races left for this decade anyway. This for me was a massive standout moment, because it was just mad how everything unfolded.
The team at the top, John, was imploding, and that's what it was. Yeah. It was imploding. It's like, imagine Mercedes now and problems at the top and problems with Mercedes.
Well, actually,
that's what it was.
When you mentioned Mercedes there, if you remember, I think when we say for where the problems started for Mark and Seb was in Turkey 2010, you could say that the problems between Hamilton and Rosberg started at this Grand Prix. Because if you remember, not only was Red Bull having problems with their team orders, Mercedes were as well, because I'm sure it was Rosberg wanting to get past Hamilton, and Ross Brawn was having none of it. Which they obeyed team orders, but Rosberg was not happy. He was like,
and that was multi 3-4.
That was multi 3-4
going after third and fourth position.
It was, and Rosberg was clearly the number one driver. Hamilton had already been there for 2 races, and Rosberg was like, well, why can't I go past him? He was fuming. And then I think Braun came on the radio and said, like, there's a massive gap ahead. Sorry, there's nothing behind you, and there's a massive gap in front. So like, there's nothing to play for. Keep the cars where they are, because if you crash, we get no points. Which you had a fair point, but I think that's where the relationship kind of turned a little bit sour between Hamilton and Rosberg in that Grand Prix, the same race as Multi 21. So really, Malaysia 2013 was a very key race for rivalries. It was like almost
Malaysia was.
It was where, like, I would say it was where the Mark Vettel Webber the Vettel Webber saga kind of ended, and a new one was opened between Hamilton and Rosberg. Yeah.
How special! It was like Star Wars, like when Anakin Skywalker dies, Darth Vader is born. So Multi 21, the massive story, and yes, you're right, Silverstone 2013 was where Mark Webber announced his retirement from Formula One. He would retire at the end of the 2013 season, of which the V8 were dying off in Formula One, replaced by the turbo hybrid V6 era. Red Bull replaced him with fellow Australian Daniel Ricciardo, who'd been promoted from Toro Rosso. So following a very Sebastian Vettel kind of move, coming from Toro Rosso, the Red Bull Junior program was in full swing, and obviously we've seen that since the future after Mark Webber. That was the end of Mark Webber in Formula One. He went off to Porsche, of which he did 3 seasons in. He now fully retired from motor racing in 2016, of where he is the president and high-ranking official of the Porsche World Endurance Championships, and also a pundit on Channel 4 F1. Mark Webber, he still had a very good career. But there's one man that he will never forget in Formula One. I was actually watching an interview with Mark and Sebastian where Seb was in Ferrari colours and Mark was interviewing him as a pundit. So do you think that their relationship or their rivalry even was just a kind of a work rivalry even? You know, as soon as they took off the Red Bull colours, you know, they would go back to just being normal people. A bit like what we thought the Lewis and Nico one was in like 2014, 2015. Or do you think it was something very sour? And that they might have been smiling on the podium when Mark was interviewing him in the 2015 Australian Grand Prix on the podium. Obviously, when Seb was in Ferrari colours and Mark was, I'll say, the guest pundit by F1. So, do you think it would have been all smiles that were real? You know, they were finally reunited outside of their rivalry at Red Bull, or do you think it was a rivalry that goes deeper than just the fake smiles that they were putting on for the cameras?
I think it was pretty much put to bed once Webber left Formula One. I think, you know, doing the interviews on the podium as well. I think it would have he would have had to be professional about this, and then he joined Channel 4 F1 as a pundit as well. So he would have been he would have been mature about it all, because he wouldn't say, right, okay, Mark, you're going to do the interviews on the podium. But by the way, Sebastian's just finished in second place, so you got to talk to him. And then he would have been like, no, I'm not talking to it. I'm not talking to Seb anymore. It's like, that would have been silly. I think they would have maybe had a phone call or something, maybe, when Webber had left, or might have met up for a coffee or a schnitzel or whatever you want. So I think there would have been I think they would, like I said, they would have put it to bed and forgotten about, for all Formula 1 fans to remember the rivalry between those two. I think that they are good firm friends now. It's all in the past, isn't it? I think Webber might have a joke on about it. I don't think he spoke about it much, not that I'm aware of anyway. But he hasn't really mentioned it hardly since it happened. But I think maybe if he releases a book, I don't know if he has released a book, but if he does, or a documentary.
He has released. Yeah, actually, just quickly, he has released a book. It's called Aussie Grit, and
never.
When I went to Singapore, because there was a lot of Australians that were at Singapore, I was on the Singapore flyer with some Australians who were telling me everything that was in the book of Aussie Grit. So if you ever find it and you think that the F1 Debate presenters might want to read of it, well, I can tell you that I've already read it, because I heard it off this family of Australians from Perth, which is where a certain Daniel Ricciardo is from, and they told me everything that is in the book Aussie Grit. And you're right, John, Sebastian Vettel is not talked about very fondly.
Exactly, and also other Formula 1 autobiographies are available as well. Yes. So yeah, exactly.
Ask at the counter.
Exactly. Like I said before, put it to bed and all that. And it's a rivalry that I do miss. I do miss it in a way, because it was just, you didn't know what was going to happen next, do you, between those two. A lot of people missed the old Sebastian Vettel. They missed the old Red Bull Sebastian Vettel. And he's not the same kind of, driver anymore, if you like, if you want to call it that.
It's kind of been put to bed, Jordan. I think the old Sebastian is, because of how he's doing with, I mean, this is not a Sebastian episode, but what he's doing with Ferrari, people kind of overlook the fact that he was a 4-time world champion with Red Bull. And you can't mention Mark without mentioning Sebastian, and I think that's what has been quite prevalent in this. Talking about him right now, that Sebastian was such a big part of his career, and I also think that when you think about Lewis's career or Nico's career, for example, that Nico Rosberg, that Lewis will appear in Nico Rosberg's career quite a lot, and also, John, that's one last question. Do you think that Lewis and Nico were a bigger rivalry than Sebastian and Mark, or not as big? Do you still think that Mark and Sebastian are, as you said, the rivalry of the decade?
I think Mark's and Sebastian's was more personal than Lewis and Nico's, because those two were for the championship, Nico and Lewis, whereas Seb and Mark, only one of them was for the world championship. So I think it would, with Mark and Seb, like I said, it was more personal. because like Mark he didn't want to be a pushover. He wasn't brought up to be a pushover. He wanted to be world champion. He wanted to win as many Grand Prix as he could, and he wasn't going to allow this young German kid to walk all over him. He's been in Formula 1 for like 6 years before Sebastian Vettel was even in a car. So, he was like, well, no, like, I was here before you. Like, who do you think you are? How are you any different to me? This is before Vettel was winning races. But like Hamilton and Rosberg, they knew each other from karting. They were good friends. They became teammates and then became rivalries quite quickly because of the World Championship. If like one of them was doing good, the other one was doing bad, you could have had a more personal rivalry between those two. But like now, I think they are more friends now. I think despite everything that's been said, I think they are more friends. But I think if you are liking the new series as well, I think you should stay tuned for one of them drivers that we will be talking about in this series and probably bring this up again. So like
yeah, exactly.
Forward to that.
And on those words, Jordan, that is the end of our episode. This is a brand new series of the F1 debate show called Drivers Decoded. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Please stay tuned for episodes in the future. We haven't really thought too much about this, but yeah, we will be planning ahead in the future.
Just like a sit down and chat. That's literally it. There's no plan behind it.
Yes, it is exactly. Yes, obviously, make sure to stay tuned for F1 debate shows, our previews and reviews and everything else on this channel. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. It really means a lot to us. We are on the road to 1,000. Give us a like if you've enjoyed this. Tell your friends, and until next time, guys, we'll see you later.
See you later, guys.